Traction in grade 1-2 of the humeroulnar joint. The patient must be lying the lateral decubitus on the affected side. The cranial hand fixates distal ends of the humerus against the bench. The mobilization hand grabs the proximal ends of the ulna, and the objective of this movement is to relieve the pain developing the joint. It's a trochial joint. The ulna is concave and the humerus is convex. Traction on grade 3 with the belt in the humeroulnar joint. The patient must be lying on the affected side. One hand fixates the distal side of the patient arm on the anterior side against the bench. A belt around the proximal ends of the arm just distally on the joint line and around our body, and the objective is to deflection immobility treatment. Traction in grade 3 of the humeroulnar joint. The patient must be lying the lateral decubitus on the affected side. The wedge fixed the humerus just proximally to the joint line. Olecranon is not fixated. Both hands grasp the forearm from the ulnar side, and patient forearm is in contact with the physiotherapist's body. The objective is the extension immobility treatment. Radial gliding of the ulna. Patient must be lying the lateral decubitus on the affected side, the lateral side of the arm and the humerus on the wedge until the jaw line. Both hands grasp the forearm from the ulnar side. Patient's forearm in contact with the physiotherapist's body. The objective is to treat immobility in varus. Ulnar gliding of the ulna. Relative. Patient must be lying on the lateral decubitus on the affected side. Ulnar is fixated against the wedge. One hand fixates the forearm against the wedge. Ternar eminence of the other hand grabs the distal end of the humerus just proximal to the joint line. The objective is to treat the immobility in valgus. Traction of the radiohumeral joint. The patient must be lying the supine. Cranial hand fixates the distal ends of the patient humerus against the bench from the anterior side. Caudal hand grabs the distal ends of the radius without including the ulna, and the objective is to look to the resting position to increase elbow flexion. Radiohumeral compression. Patient lying on the affected side. Cranial hand fixes the distal ends of the arm against the bench from the anterior side. The other hand grabs the distal ends of radius, and the objective is to correct the distal position full of the radius respecting to the humerus. Ventral gliding of the radius. It's a progression to deflection. The patient must be lying supine. The physiotherapist is standing in the affected side. One hand fixates the distal part of the humerus. The other hand grabs the proximal ends of the patient's radius around the hand of the neck of the radius, and the objective is to increase the elbow flexion. Dorsal gliding of the radius. Progression to the extension. The patient lying supine or sitting. The physiotherapist is standing in the affected side, with a wedge under the distal part of the humerus. The other hand grabs to the proximal end of the patient radius around the hand of the neck of the radius. The objective is to increase elbow extension in the radiohumeral joint. Ventral gliding of the upper radioulnar joint. The patient must be sitting on a chair. One hand supports and fixes the proximal ends of the ulna. The other hand grabs the proximal end of the patient's hands of the radius without the ternar eminence on it. And the objective is to increase the supination of the forearm. Dorsal gliding of the radioulnar joint. The patient must be sitting. The fixation hand fixes the proximal end of the ulna. The mobilization hand grabs the proximal end of the patient's radius around the head of the radius without the thumb on it. And the objective is to increase the pronation of the forearm. Distal gliding of the radioulnar joint. The patient must be lying in supine. One hand fixes the proximal end of the ulna, and the other hand grabs the distal end of the radius. The objective is to stretch the radioulnar syndesmosis. Proximal gliding of the radioulnar joint. The patient must be lying in the homolateral decubitus. The fixation hand fixes the distal end of the humerus and olecranon against the bench. The mobilizing hand grabs the distal ends of radius, and the objective is to correct the distal position fault of the radius in the relation of the ulna.